to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. On September 26, 2012, I recorded with my now ex-wife the first episode of LOA Today. And a couple months later, I did my 12th show, an interview with the gentleman who's sitting here with me, Joel Elston. And now we're sitting here 11 years later, Joel, and we are recording episode number 2000 together.
That's amazing.
Talk about time speeding up.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, I mean, the 2000 numbers, obviously you've been on every one of those, and I'm on a little bit of those. But the part that fascinates me equal to that is when what just hit me, 11 years.
Yeah.
11 years. The stuff that has happened 11 years ago.
No kidding.
I can't even get it all in my mind.
It's mind-boggling. That's really the right phrase to describe it. And it's also exhilarating. I mean, if you had said to me after that 12th episode that I did where you were on my show for the first time, if you had said to me that I was going to do 1,000 episodes, let alone 2,000, I would have laughed in your face.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. I get it. Well, again, when we did the show the first time, it was that was a one-off for me. Just, hey, I was going to be on this guy's show.
Yeah.
And you were doing it on the law of attraction. I was running a treatment center that used the law of attraction. And you said, hey, this will be a good idea. And I said, well, this will be good advertisement for us. So we agreed.
Yeah.
And had no idea that it was obvious. And then you figure out all the shifts and turns since 11 years. Like you started with the comment, it was your ex-wife. I mean, that seemed, wow. And all of a sudden here we are. It's just it fits into the concept because time is perception based, and it really makes a difference when you looking back. The rearview mirror offers like, wow, all that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
I have changed careers. I've lost a son in a tragic accident. I've adopted a son.
Mm-hmm.
I've had just so many changes in my life in 11 years. It's just amazing.
The topic today is time speeding up is a fascinating one because, as you point out, it is all about perception and it's very subjective. As we look back over 11 years, there's a lot of stuff that happened in 11 years. So I can say, looking back, it actually seems like a long time, longer than 11 years.
Yes.
Talk about the perception of it. It just feels like, almost not forever, but it feels like ancient times by comparison.
Well, yeah. And you see that because your point of reference, while it's happening, everything seems to be, at the same pace, and, you don't realize, but when you look cumulatively at all the events that have happened, the people that are no longer with us, the situations that change, the things I worried about and was concerned about 11 years ago are not remotely the things that affect my world now.
Right.
It's just such an amazing, concept. And I love the fact that that we are on this show because it allows us to reflect, and it leads into, the point of what we were talking about is this summer in particular. And I have some logical reasons why, but I have mentioned to several people that it felt like this summer didn't even really happen. It came upon us, and it was like, okay, I remember Memorial Day was there, and I was planning on Justin and I were going to maybe consider going out of the country. Well, our passports were not able to get here in time, so I never made a vacation plan. And then all of a sudden, it was like a week to go when there's no school.
Yeah,
and the school starts, and I was like, oh my gosh! So summer just sort of disappeared. And again, I know that I was busier at work than normal, so I just sort of wrote it off as I just can't believe that. Plus, and we'll talk about why aging affects, as you get older, the passage of time, perception changes. But I mean, even my younger clients or people that really shouldn't be affected that much by it are like, it just seems like this is something different. This seems faster. And I've heard that theme from other people of all different walks of life, and nobody can really quantify it. but it's more than perception. Sometimes it feels like, it's like, okay, this is there a reason why? And of course, I'm going to have some answers of maybe why, but of course, once I have a question, me, I go on deep dives all over the planet and, looking for somebody. And I've actually spoke with a quantum physicist that, I'm sorry, a theoretical physicist that shared his opinion that he first assured me that it was nothing supernatural. He explained the brain, explained how observation, and the older we get, the more we operate out of our subconscious brain. There's nothing really new. When you're 10, everything's new, and there's new things to discover. So it's like you're operating at the speed of the conscious brain, which is much slower. But as we age, most of our stuff is done at the subconscious level, which is a much faster mechanism. So the perception seems faster. That makes it a lot of sense. But then then I'm hanging up the phone with this guy. He said, Joel, this did seem to me unusually fast. The summer didn't seem to happen for me. So even this guy who has a complete understanding of why our perception is different felt this was a shorter version of summer than normal. And I hear that a lot. And are you feeling that way too, Walt, or is your perception different?
I'll tell you what, my perception is a little different. And let me tell you why it's different. It's different because I cannot say that I have experienced any time in the last 5 to 10 years or so, and I can't pin down exactly when it started to happen, but I can't pin down any particular time where it was a consistently increasing or consistently decreasing apparent passage of time. For me, it shifts by the moment.
Right.
So for instance, I can look back to what was going on with me this past June, and it was crawling.
Yes.
It was crawling at a snail's pace.
Yes.
And it crawled at a snail's pace through mid-July when I started making some shifts. And once I made those shifts, it accelerated and August disappeared.
Yes.
So I actually have periods where it seems slow and other periods where it seems fast. And I know what my theory is. I get what the theoretical physicists and the quantum physicists are trying to tell us, but I'm also reminded that we're human beings. We created time. Time is a human construct, and because it's a human construct, we have a lot more control over it than we realize because of that perceptive quality that we all have, and because of that ability to control it, we really do. We control it moment by moment, and I would posit the idea that we control it through what we're giving our attention to and how we're feeling about it.
That's a really good point, and also maybe using this gentleman's theory, and when everything sort of fell apart on you, and the situation happened in your personal life, the moment that happened, we spoke pretty quickly after that happened, and
last October,
yeah, and as all this sort of unfolded, the moment that you and your ex-wife separated, the moment all that took place, right? You stopped. Your life was totally operating subconsciously because you're in the routine. You're doing that. You're getting up every day. You're running the business. You're talking to the cats. You're like before the show. You're trying to negotiate with a cat. And all these things. But then all of a sudden, when that's pulled away from you, then you have all new stuff. So now you get totally conscious brain based. And if you remember, our subconscious brain operates at about 40 million bytes per second, where the conscious brain operates at 40,000 bytes per second. So it's a much slower process. So there, again, that affects the perception. And I've used this example before. If you really want to know how long a minute is, do a plank for 1 minute.
Yes.
do a plank for 1 minute, and you will have a new appreciation for what a minute is, because a minute is about 6 hours at that point. So,
and you pointed out last October, that day that happened, literally time stopped.
Yes, it did.
I mean, it isn't that it slowed down; it came to a halt.
Right. The morning that I found out my son died, it was 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. He was in a car wreck the night before, and it was in August of 2014. And literally the words came out and everything, the brakes stopped.
Yeah.
It just nothing. There was no time. I was totally living in an event that I didn't know how to comprehend. I don't really know for the first day or two where I was even, there's just no concept of time. And as you pointed out, time is a perception, certainly, but it's also a man-made construct to measure things. It has no real bearing. The Earth is also spinning faster than it's ever spent. Now it's increasing, which is interesting. They have a leap second that they add every now and then to compensate for the Earth spinning faster. And I don't think that has anything to do with it. But again, we have access to all this information, which is being thrown at us at all different ways, 24-hour news cycles. Nothing stops. It used to be there was breaks. You were almost forced to take breaks from things.
Yeah.
But everything is just all the time now. So that does affect your perception. And, the idea that, like when I have one of my newer clients is a young man, and he had been to several therapists before, and he always hated it. So he agreed to have a session with me. And see, his parents said, just have one session with this guy. If you like it, you can meet with him. And if you don't, so he sits down, he had your normal little, cocky little 13-year-old stuff going on. He wasn't gonna, and then he got into the conversation, and I told him, so wow, the hour went by, and he goes, that was an hour? That was he said that I've never had an hour go that fast, because he was into a conversation. So again, all of that is real. And where I'm ultimately getting with this, and it's no matter how fast time is going, we do need to focus on right now. We do need to realize this is today. In theory, this is all we have is today at this moment, right now. And we may have another one tomorrow, we may not, but we have this right now. And we do have a tendency to keep, fast forwarding. There was a movie, a really bad movie, by the way, with Adam Sandler, where he had a remote control that sped up his life. A typical Adam Sandler movie, but there was a lesson in there. He was just getting tired of the minutia, of sitting through the kids' baseball game, of all the redundancies at work. So he just kept fast forwarding, 6 months or a year at a time. And he thought
I can almost see where this is going. I can just see where this is going. Yeah.
And of course it's Adam Sandler, so we're not going real deep. But he realized all of a sudden, everybody aged, including him. And, it's 20 years later, and there's no going back. There isn't a rewind button there. And, the kids, he obviously is aware of what happened, but they're like, hey, Dad, we can't make it this weekend. We're going up the lake or whatever. And he just, he spent the end of the movie just kicking himself, because that was, obviously he just fast forwarded his whole life. And he
fast forwarded past the good stuff. That's what he realized. He fast forwarded past the good stuff. He thought it was the boring stuff, and it was actually the good stuff.
Well, and that gets back to the journey versus the destination. The journey is the good stuff. The destination is the irrelevant part. So, the idea that you're striving for something so much that you're bypassing the point of our life, which is today. And so being grounded in that, learning to appreciate what happens within a day, it's something that there's a great lesson in this. Our perception, there's also a study Harvard did. They asked 100 kids, and I think they were 7-year-olds. They would time them for a minute, and they would ask the kid, "Tell me when you think a minute is up." Yeah. And then they ask 170-year-olds, "Tell me when you think a minute is up." And they had no reference to look at anything.
Right.
The average kid thought the minute was up in about 37 seconds. The 70-year-olds was a minute 40.
Yeah.
And they weren't counting. They were just, how does it feel? And again, the perception as you age, it isn't so much the slowing of the process, but there's nothing really new if you don't allow new things to be happening. So it every day seems the same. It's me driving to work this morning. I drive the same way I drive to work every single morning. It's a very boring drive. Unless something happens, I don't specifically remember the drive in. I'm subconsciously operating. So that 10 or 15 minutes it takes me, about 15 minutes it takes me to get to work, is really just, I am checked out for that 15 minutes. It's not there. And that's a key
point. That's a very key point, and I want to come to that directly, because it goes right back to what I was trying to express before, but it does it better, because part of what I was trying to express is that what we're giving our attention to and how we're feeling about it is only done in the now. You made reference to, paying more attention to what goes on in the now. And so what I'm thinking is, the more attentive we are, the more aware we are of what's going on right now, that's when time slows down. The less attentive we are, that's when time speeds up.
Yes.
And
yes.
So, for instance, you gave the example of the kids and the older people who were asked what their perception of time was, and the kid thought the minute was up in 35 seconds, and the older people thought it was well past a minute. Well, the kids live much more in the now. That's just part of being a kid.
Yes.
So
Completely.
It was easy for him to stay in that place where it just seemed to take forever. Whereas the adult is so attuned, if you can call it that. Attuned is probably not the best word. Distracted, that might be a better word. Distracted away from paying attention to the now, that the time that it actually is kind of stretches in his imagination, so it seems to go flying by really, really fast, just because he's not as attentive. Which to me is like, if you want scientific evidence that says we need to pay more attention to the now, that's it. That's the evidence.
Absolutely.
Right there.
Right there, completely. Yes. Well, that's that childlike mentality that we were talking about, because the kids are looking at that. The reason I enjoy working with younger kids so much is I'm fascinated by their fascination. They are in awe of everything.
Yeah.
A dump truck can just be the most amazing thing. I think I've shared you this before. I have a young man a long time ago. He didn't like the fact that I just asked questions. So we agreed for me to ask 5 questions and he could ask 5 questions. Okay.
Oh,
so
okay.
that was a strategy. It worked real well. And so he was I forget how, pretty young though. Mm-hmm. And his first question, he said, "What is your 3rd favorite Beatle?"
Well, I'm curious. What was your answer?
I don't have many Beatles, to be honest with you. So, it caught me off guard, and I just said, well, the Asian Beatle, and he goes, "I don't know if that's a Beatle." I said, "Oh, it is," and
I thought maybe it was going to be Ringo Starr or something. I mean.
I almost went that way, but that would have totally messed up his whole strategy. So, then I said, "Well, you got to answer that question." And he said, "Well, my top 5 are boom, boom, boom." I'm like, so, yeah, it's just, I never expected what's your favorite Beatle would have been okay, or what's your favorite bug? I could get that one, but your 3rd favorite. So within that context, so I that's why I'm fascinated with their brains, because everything to them is fascinating, and when they have an epiphany, they're like, "Oh my God!" They're really animated and they've learned something. Where after a while, you do this so much and you hear so much, and one thing that I try never to do, and because I'm very passionate about what I do for a living, I love the people I work with, and I have one of my efforts on a daily basis is to never become complacent, even though what I do on some level is redundant. It's similar type things. Each person's individual thing is theirs, even if it's the exact same story of the person that was sitting in the chair before them. And so I never try to do that, because it's such an important connection I'm making that I have to work hard at staying in the now with them. So my work week is, my days sometimes they don't seem to fly. I mean, even though I really love what I do, I do feel like, okay, that was an 8-hour day, because I did 8 hours without no subconscious work. But then on the weekends, if I, I'm usually pretty active, but if there was football on this weekend, I hadn't seen any in a while. So I sat down, I watched football. That's mindless activity. And I probably was scrolling on my phone far more than I normally do, because I'm sitting in my chair just watching football. And I lost my Saturday. I lost my Saturday. I realized I accomplished nothing on Saturday. I mean, I worked out and stuff, but it wasn't my normal feel like I got a lot done. Because I was in just that subconscious scrolling, that doom scrolling, or whatever term you want to use. And that leads me to social media, gives the perception of speeding up time as well. again, because the access to all that, the mind-numbing repetitiveness of TikTok or Instagram, where you're just constantly scrolling and scrolling. You're these brief hits of dopamine, see something, move on, boom, boom, boom. If you look at your screen time, the average person, you'll be shocked at how much screen time you have on each app. If you really look at that, it's amazing.
Well, you can look it up on your phone; it'll show you. And
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If you look that up, most people are shocked to realize how much time they spend on that.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised that I spend any time. And then I look at it and say, "Well, I spent an hour on the phone this week." Who knew?
Yeah.
And that's nothing compared to most people I know. But that shows how little
Yeah.
time I spend on the phone. But it's one of those things that unless you're really paying attention, you don't realize it. Now, there's another element I want to bring in here, because you and I have remarked on this many, many times over the past 11 years doing all the episodes. I mean, you're right. You weren't part of all of them, but you were part of a large chunk of them. We experienced it over and over and over again. My God, that episode went by. That hour went by so fast. Now, There's an interesting piece to that, because we're pretty focused on what's going on in the episode, right?
Yes.
So I posited the idea earlier that if we're focused in on the now seems to go slower. So why does it seem to go faster? That's the obvious question that comes up. And I think I know what the answer is. We live in a world of contrast, polarity. Light and dark, positive, negative, happy, unhappy, good, bad, all that kind of stuff. And we human beings have this really interesting little weirdness to us. We love the negative. We're just drawn in on the negative. We pay so much attention to it. So we're actually going to spend a lot of time in this life focusing on the negative and experiencing it as a slow-paced event.
Yes.
So what does humor do? Humor lightens the load. Humor takes our minds off of it. And as you know, when we do our episodes, we're laughing half the way through. I mean, most of the time we're laughing throughout. So we're basically we're doing these deep dives into these topics that usually have a lot of harshness or roughness or pain or suffering attached to it, and then we find a way to laugh at it. And we're actually spending more time laughing than we are on the element that we're focusing our attention on. So as much as we think we're in the now, much of the time we're actually separating ourselves from the now because it's too damn painful.
Well, and that's sort of the paradox of a lot of this, because you find one rule that applies to one group of thinking, but it doesn't apply over here. It's just the idea that when you're in the now, you're enjoying, you're feeling, you're tangibly doing it. But when you're in a discussion that's invigorating and you're laughing and you're feeding off the energy of another person, that's its own category to me. That's its own, it's almost like you're in a warp bubble from time. And, the idea that during that time, 30 minutes seems to have passed for us, but a whole hour went by because we were in that sort of that concept of, in that, we're, even though I always tell people we've never met, but we're good friends, and we truly enjoy speaking with each other. And our humor is really good. The off-air humor is even better. But you get this. This is such a that when you're in tune with that connected piece, again, you're separated. I know there have been times, and it's been a long time since I've ever had this feeling, but when you're really in love with somebody and you're really in that connected state, you feel like the world's sort of spinning around you too.
Yeah, sure.
It's operating outside of you. And so connection somehow bypasses all of it. It's almost like time sort of stands still at the same time. It stands still, but it within the bubble. For example, the observer effect of, the relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity, if in theory, if I'm watching somebody, travel, which I know they can't, but at the speed of light, at least with our technology, we can. Somebody travel the speed of light, and they're in a spaceship, and I'm watching them on the horizon for 15 minutes as they're way out in the middle of space, but I'm able to see them, and they're going across at the speed of light, and I can observe it for 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes has passed, for me, but the speed of light, nothing has passed for them. Something traveling at the speed of light doesn't have a clock. It's just that is time, so it defeats time. I discovered this in this search too. And this was fascinating to me. Where the GPS satellites are operating in mid-orbit.
Right.
You have low orbit for the space station and stuff like that, and then above that you have mid-orbit, and in effect the clocks on the mid-orbit GPS satellites run faster
Right.
than here on, and they had to, but they have an exact formula to figure it out. So they've
Because they have to
adapted
adjust
for
the
that.
clock. They have to sync up the clocks.
Yeah, but they figured it out. Like if you ask, ask your, I don't want to say the device because it'll answer me, but ask one of my devices here in the house, what is sunset for Richmond, Virginia?
Mm-hmm.
It will immediately tell me sunset tonight is going to be 7:43 or whatever that number is going to be.
Right.
And if I ask what is sunset on, December 18th, 2073, it'll tell me.
Yeah.
Because it's that precise. It's that precise. You can account for that. And again, I'm fascinated by how that works. But as you adjust time by being further away and all the other things, gravity affects it. It's so complicated that my poor little brain is just listening to all this stuff. And I'm like, wow. So nothing matters because time really doesn't exist except, again, by humans. It's not one of the laws. There isn't a law of time. We have a measurement of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't have to be places or acknowledge or want to keep records, we wouldn't have to have time. But it's something that we need. I know when I'm on vacation and there's nothing for me to do, I'm not real, other than looking up at the sun or my stomach's hungry, I don't really know what time it is. You know what I mean? It's just, it doesn't matter what time it is.
There's an additional piece to this, and I want to reference what I was mentioning a few moments ago about how the more focused we are on the now, the slower the time appears to be, and how we typically as humans focus on negative. But it also works with positive. I mean, if you can really focus on now with a positive feeling, you can also slow time down that way. You can speed it up. You can actually do both. I mean, we're capable of that. But the natural tendency is going to be the more that we focus in on something, whether positively or negatively, the more it's going to slow itself down. I mean, last October, when my ex-wife left me, everything seemed to come to a stop because I was so focused on that event. I couldn't take my attention off of it, actually. So
that's all you can think about.
It's like I was just stuck right there on that one point, and that's why time seemed to just come to a standstill. But the same thing can happen if we are focusing on something that we really, really love, and we just stay there. Now, here's the interesting thing, and I'm really curious to know what your take is on this, because this is like another way of saying the same kind of question I've asked over and over again to you on the show over the last 11 years, which is this. It's really easy for us to focus, not easy, it's easier for us to focus on something in the now that's negative. It's harder for us, for some reason, and that's part of the question, it's harder for us to focus on something really, really positive in the now and stay focused on that. So let's start with that question. Why is it easier with stuff that's negative and harder with stuff that's positive?
Probably the answer to every time you ask that in some form or fashion is we're predisposed to a negative concept. The negativity has been supported through evolution. It's been, so we have a bias toward negative. It's a protective mechanism for most of us to scan the horizon for the negative. And then, so that's the main, we're just not as practiced as looking and staying in the positive. Exactly. So that's the number one thing. But people that, I know for me, for the years that, since you and I started talking 11 years ago, and the distance I've traveled with sort of the law of attraction and my perspective of life, I just don't, the negative is automatically dismissed. It doesn't, you get so conditioned to dismissing it that it can't occupy space. And that feels so good. It feels so good. Now, obviously, there could be traumatic events. I'm not trying to say every scenario, but just on day to day, like, there's, my brain it used to do this scan of, okay, what's wrong right now? What potential dangers are out there? There's no dangers out there. It's all good. It's just, there's no dangers. I've let all that, I've let the alert system down. It's good. If something comes up, I'll handle it. But it's just, it takes years of really working on that getting away from how we operate. And societal norms are focused on negatives. The whole political system, the news system, everything we're being is driven by negative reporting, by negative. There's no longer a candidate just saying, here's what I'm going to do for our country. Nobody's doing that.
Well, there actually never has been, but your point is valid.
Yeah. They've never had. But I mean, particularly now, at least somebody would give you a general, hey, here's an idea. Let's trickle down some economics, or let's do this. They don't even try it anymore. It's just, this dude's bad, or yes, I have done some bad things, but this dude has done worse things, so vote for me.
Right.
It's like, oh.
Yeah. Whoops, we got to disconnect here. We have to reconnect Joel.
Yeah, but at least I didn't leave.
So anyway, while Joel is coming back in, I'm loving what he was saying, and I hesitate to carry on the conversation without him because I know we're going to go off into a cool direction. So I'm going to give him like 10 seconds to see if he can. There you are. Okay, yes, now you're back.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that was a quick blip, thank goodness. But that sort of lost where I was at because I kept rambling. But the concept that all of this is, it's all taking place internally, and you are in charge, as you pointed out, which I love. And by the way, side note, if you do figure out a way to help me make that 1 minute plank go faster, I will give you $1,000.
Well, I won't hold you to the $1,000, although I'm always open to receive money. But I'm going to give you something that I think might lead in that direction. So you tell me whether or not you think this works, because it's part of the reason why I set it up the way I did, the way I was describing it. How it's so much easier to focus in on the negative than on the positive, and I think you actually nailed it. The reason that we have such an easier time focusing in on the now when it's a negative association is because we're used to doing that. That's where, like you said, we're predisposed because that's what we keep doing. But there's an interesting other piece to it, which is if you can discipline yourself, not discipline, but if you can exert the discipline to deliberately focus on positivity a lot more within the now, within what's happening right in that now moment, you can actually learn to make that a more consistent experience. Now, you just described very eloquently that you really don't pay much attention to the negative anymore. But now I got to follow up with the follow-up question, which is, how much time do you think you actually spend in the now focusing on what's positive right now? How often do you find yourself doing that in a day?
Pretty frequently, to be fair. I have an ongoing inventory of what's right throughout my day. That's my dialogue. That's, again, this is from years of training this. I have programmed I will say mini gratitude list, or I really appreciate this. I was in my office today, and we had it was 99 degrees today in Richmond. It was really hot. Okay. And my office was a nice, cool 67. I was so grateful for 67. I spent quite a bit of time being grateful. My clients would come in and go, "It feels so good in here." I said, "Doesn't it?" I'm certainly not the norm in this, but I've been so into this process for so long that I spend multiple moments really looking for something positive about whatever scenario I'm in. And that's took a lot of work, but I admit that's not the norm, and that hasn't always been the case.
But it's still very cool, literally.
Yes.
That was about as literally cool as you're going to get.
Yes.
But I love that. I love the way you described that. And I'm wondering if you can also kind of take it a step further and describe when you were focusing on how grateful you were about how cool it was. It was 67 as opposed to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. What is that like when you're in that zone? Can you describe that feeling?
It's bliss. It's contentment. It's, I don't have a good adjective list for it, but it's almost undescribable. It's contentment comes as close as possible. It's being understanding that I am appreciative. I am sincerely appreciative to be sitting where I'm sitting. And I go further in the thought is it's not just sitting in a 67, I got a beautiful office, a beautiful part of town, have a, great client group that I work with. So the whole package is, I literally will say, I love my life. At least 10 times a day. I say, not in a just set. I go, wow. Like as soon as I say that 67, I say, I really love the life that I have manifested for myself, that I brought to. And again, the universe responds with more loving of life.
I love the fact that you mentioned that it was hard to find words to describe it. I think that's a key thing. I think it's one of the reasons why most of us humans find it's a little bit challenging to focus in on the now, because we have so many words to describe negatives. I mean, it's almost an endless list. The list by comparison of words that we have to describe positive is really short. It's a much, much shorter list. And so, like you were alluding to there, if we try to come up with a way to describe it, the words almost disappear immediately. You know, you came up with a few words of bliss and so forth that describe it, but it becomes very challenging. I haven't done this as much lately as I like doing it, but there are times when I've been doing this one exercise, which is to focus on something like what you described, where you're in a cool room on a hot day and just really appreciating that cool room. And as I'm doing it, I'm asking myself, how would I describe this to myself from, say, 20 minutes before I got into this cold room? How would I describe that? And then just let it flow. In other words, I don't think about it. It's not like I'm asking my brain to construct something. I simply let it flow. By it, I mean, you know, what we usually call that interconnection, that interconnection to source energy, or however you want to call it, but that interconnection to who we are deep inside, and let that flow, let that come out. And when I can do that, I find that I can describe really pleasant situations with a lot more verbiage than normal, simply because I'm allowing myself to connect to it. So alluding again to what you were talking about before, you talked about the value of that connectedness when we're in that now state. It really is valuable. So that even when we're trying to do something that would normally be difficult because there's such a short list of words to associate with it, we can still do it because the connectedness helps us to do it despite the odds.
Yeah. Which, circling back, I haven't gotten there with the plank, to be fair.
Well, all you gotta do is you gotta apply the same principle. The trick is you gotta find some way to say, I like the plank. Right now you're treating it like I don't like the plank.
As my abdominal muscles feel like they're ripping apart and my body's shaking,
and I know the feeling too, because I do the same thing.
I have not got to grandmaster level to appreciate that as fun. Now, I will do incredibly ridiculous heavy sets of squats and deadlifts and what. I love all that. That's all positive. It's just the individual plank is my nemesis. It is. And I tried to say, I enjoy this. And literally my body's screaming at you, no, you don't. You do not. So
I have a similar thing going on. I have an injured Achilles. It's not something that was an acute injury that happened in the last 6 to 12 months or something like that. It's actually an injury, a time injury that has occurred largely because of my height, because I'm very tall. And so from my perspective, the world is all down. Everything is down. And so I compensate. My body has learned over the years to compensate for difference in height so that a counter that is normal for somebody else is way lower for me. So I compensate in order to be able to interact with that counter. Sure. Problem is, when I do that, I mess up my posture. And that messing up a posture, I've learned a lot from my physical therapist, I got to tell you. That messing up of my posture over time has degraded my Achilles tendon. And there's a whole reason why, because of the way our bodies are all, all the muscles and tendons and ligaments and all that. They're all
important. There's a system, the whole chain there. It's a system.
The whole thing's going on there, right? Yeah. So among other things, my physical therapist has me doing some exercises to shift all of that, so that I stop putting stresses on my Achilles and can allow it to heal. And of course, a tendon takes months and months to heal. So you're going through a lot of this exercising. Well, one of the exercises they have me doing, it turns out that because of the ways that I've been compensating over the years, I have a lot of trouble standing for any length of time on one foot. Most people can just stand on one foot, no big deal. In fact, I was on the phone with my brother, he's only 6 foot tall. he's 8 inches shorter than me. And I said, can you do it? He says, yeah, I can do it. So he did it for like 30 seconds. I said, yeah, how's it going? Oh, I'm stable, no problem. Now, 30 seconds for me, I'm practically falling over at that point. Right. So it's kind of an indicator of just how out of whack my body has become in order to compensate for all the different ways I have to deal with being tall.
Sure.
Another thing that my physical therapist has me doing is an exercise where basically I walk slowly, and by walking I mean taking one step that's maybe a foot ahead of the other foot, and the feet are like a foot to a foot and a half apart. So I'm basically creeping along without my heels touching the ground. So I'm doing it on my toes, so to speak, very slowly. It's amazing for me how difficult it is to do that because my balance is all over the place. Right.
Yes.
So it's kind of a similar thing to the plank because my brain is saying, you can't possibly do this. And my body's saying, you're right, I can't do this. Oh my God. But a funny thing has happened as I've been learning to do this exercise. I've been retraining myself almost without realizing it to believe that I actually can do it. And so even though my physical therapist only gave me this exercise a week ago, and I have my next meeting with her tomorrow, I've learned like 90% how to do it. I'm not 100% stable, but I'm a lot more stable than I was just a week ago. Why?
Yes.
Because I've achieved a level of belief that I can do it that I didn't have a week ago.
Completely right. Do you remember the show we had on Milton Erickson that had polio, and he retrained himself to using the exact same theory? Basically, you didn't use a baby to do it, but you retrained your mind.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So my point is, now if we're going to tie that into time, when I was trying to creep along a week ago, the idea of being able to go from one foot to the next on my toes with that kind of situation I was describing, and make that step and hold it for more than a second seemed impossible.
Yes.
Now I can hold it for like 10 seconds. I just expanded my perception of time by 10 seconds.
Yes. Yeah.
And that shows how quickly we're able to do that.
Yes.
I mean, I demonstrated how easily we're able to shift perception of time.
Yes. And that's fantastic. The brain, the mind, as we talk about this so much. It's, the name of the show is LOA Today, but we've always been talking about the brain and the mind and how it, does that. And the perception of time speeding up, or the perception of, being able to visualize or being able to make yourself take these steps in a different way and perceive them differently. You do that internally all the time. And, when we wake up tomorrow and, the routine, it's funny to, look at your routine I love to look, sort of evaluate routines. What do you do when you get up? Some people go to the bathroom, some people go get their coffee, some, whatever. It's pretty much the same thing every morning for most adults, at least. Kids are running crazy trying to get to school or whatever, but I mean, adults generally have a routine, and they get good routines or bad routines. They at least have a routine, and the body, the systems of the body do best on routine. The subconscious programming of our brain operates in routines. That way, it doesn't have to think new thing. Get up, make the coffee. When I changed offices, about 3 years ago, I moved to a nicer office. I'd been at the other office for like 7 years. Mm-hmm. And so we leased a new place. It's about 2 miles away from where the other office, but it's a much different way to get there, an entirely different way to get there. Okay. I stay on interstate, another exit longer. First 2 or 3 days, I drove myself to the old office.
Of course.
Yeah, just out of habit. And now, if I were to try to go to the old office, I would have to recalculate how to get there. It's just because it's not my thing. The new office is so we do that. We have the ability to, the body and brain wants routine. It wants subconscious programming. It wants to operate from the subconscious. It's so much more efficient operating from the subconscious. But the conscious is where now is. And pulling yourself out of the subconscious to experience the now is part of the hope. You could do that. Be grateful for right now. Be grateful for something tangible. I like to touch things and be grateful for it. Or like, this sounds superficial, but it's not. I was in my car today, and I got a really nice car, and I really love this car. I just touched the little leather thing on my console, and I really love this car. I'm very appreciative to be in a position to be able to have this vehicle. It's a really good car. And that's trying to be now and be grateful for what exists.
But when you establish the pattern of doing that, because like you said, the previous pattern with going to the offices, you were going to the old office, so you kept going to the old office until you retrained yourself, until you established a new pattern. Similarly, with focusing on the now, we can focus on the now, on a positive now, and train ourselves to believe in a positive now. Interesting fact about that. I don't know if you knew this one. I didn't know this one. I had a guest on about a week and a half ago. I don't remember. I don't think she said this during the show. I think she said it to me in the after show conversation that we often have. But she told me that scientists have determined that the amount of time it takes to program a new pathway into the human body is 67 days. And I thought that was a really interesting fact, because I mean, how many programs are 30-day programs?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the 30-day programs, apparently, according to what science is saying, aren't going far enough.
Well, the only reason I know what she's saying is correct, one of the most baffling things were 30-day programs were a big part of my life for a long time. And treatment centers generally last 30 days, 28 to 30 days.
Right.
And people used to think there was some logic or reason behind that. Maybe it's scientific to get the brain to change or whatever. Truth is, insurance companies needed a tangible number.
Yeah.
Because they needed, people were taking advantage, and so we will pay for 30 days of treatment. And of course, they'll find a model that says 30 days of treatment is good to back it up, so that's what they're going to pay for. Truth is, 67 days is sort of the minimum, depending on how difficult the change is. That's why programs need to be. I'm very much in favor of 90-day programs, because I think you need the 67 to 70 days to make that change, and then another 20 days or so to sort of solidify that change.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So I guess what the reason I'm bringing that up is it's kind of a reminder when we're trying to create a new pattern of behavior for ourselves, particularly if we're trying to do something like establish the habit of focusing on positivity more often, we got to really do it for a while. I mean, we can't just do it for a week. Can't be a 2-week thing. Can't be 3 weeks. It's got to be a quarter of the year. It's got to be a 3-month period to really pull it off. And that's a little bit daunting, but on the other hand, it's kind of nice to know that actually is going to work. Science tells us it's going to work if we are willing to stick it out that long.
Yeah, and a lot of people, again, I have a side working theory that for something like that 67 days would be bare minimum, because those are deeply programmed things. You get generational and inheritance, generational behavior of negativity. That, I mean, you're not just your generation. My family, as I've talked about, was a lot of mental illness, a lot of addiction. My mother just had anxiety her entire life. So I was born, while I was in her womb, I was exposed to all of the stress chemicals. The moment I was born, I was exposed to her stress energy the entire time.
Right.
I fed on her breast milk, which was full of, again, I'm not being mean to my mom. She couldn't help all that, but I literally was weaned on anxiety.
Yeah.
And so that is something that's probably a higher bar. So anxiety always leads to protective thought, negative thought. Don't do that. That's dangerous. What could go wrong? Things are fine now, but what's on the horizon that could go wrong? I have one of my clients, I have a couple of clients that are coaches, professional coaches, and the big, and college football takes place, and there's nothing more loved than a good college football coach, and nothing more hated than a perception of a bad football coach. And so this coach that I work with, a really good guy, works really hard. He's in his fifth year, and fifth year, they start to get a little nervous if you're not doing stuff. Well, his first game was last weekend, and they started off rough. I mean, it was pretty rough. It was interception, and they got behind 14 points. Now they ended up having a great second half, and they came back and won, which is great, right?
Okay. But
the social media negativity, we need a new coach already. He couldn't prepare for the game. We got lucky to win. Nobody was focused on the win. They're wanting to fire him.
Right.
So his perspective is, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything. These people, they're just unreasonable. I built this and my reframe is, how much is your buyout? It's $25 million. I'm like, worst case scenario, they hand you a $25 million check and you go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad deal, and but yet his focus is, on the negative, and you can't help it because it's so loud, and the reporters asking the same questions, and the alumni who fund the whole thing are, they're on him, and at the end of the day, it's a very negative place to work. So he is always scanning the horizon for negativity.
Yeah, and quite understandably, especially when you frame it that way, because when you frame it that way, that's how we understand someone else's perspective, and you're helping us to understand his perspective. Once you understand what his perspective is, whoa, that's really very different from the way we would have seen the same situation because we weren't in his place, which is understandable. We were in the stands saying, "Well, how'd you give up those 2 touchdowns?"
One of the quick, and I don't usually bring sports in this, but LSU had a coach that won the national championship a couple of years ago, Coach O. Orgeron, great guy, funny guy, and he sort of fell into the role, ended up winning a national championship. The alumni didn't like him, and the school, after the year of winning national championship, he had a rough year, very, very rough year. So national championship, rough year, and so he had signed this nice contract. So they showed up to fire him toward the end of the year, and I loved his perspective. It was hilarious. They said, "We're going to buy out your contract. We're depositing $18 million into your account." And he goes, "I have 2 questions. What door do you want me to leave from, and what time do you want me out?" He said, "I stood up and shook their hand and said, nobody's ever given me $18 million to be fired." He said, "I've already," he said, he just had the best. He said, "I'm set for life." It's just a whole different concept. He never blinked. He just said, "Yeah, that's no problem."
What a wonderful attitude that is. That's the attitude that I keep trying to. That's the attitude I want to have on a day-to-day basis. He had the advantage in the sense that he knew that was actually going to be 18 million into his account, but nevertheless, that attitude is what got him there.
Well, and that's what that's part of the technique that I use, to get to this place. I'm in a wonderful position in life. I don't have to work. I love to work. I'm going to keep working, but I'm doing everything I choose to do. There's nothing coming along the horizon that I'm fearing. I can handle whatever comes along the horizon. I've handled the most, the life has thrown a bunch of stuff at me, and I've handled all of it. So there's nothing I can't handle that comes across me. I'm prepared. There's nobody more prepared than me to handle whatever comes. I'm in great health. I don't allow that narrative to interrupt. It doesn't. I don't give it space, and eventually it just quits trying.
So here's what I think it's all adding up to, because the topic of the day is time speeding up. Episode number 2000. After 2000 episodes, we've had a whole bunch of time to deal with this whole question of time. But is time speeding up? And we've already agreed that humans created time. Humans are able to essentially experience time slowly or quickly, depending on how and what we're giving our attention to. Isn't it really possible? Isn't it actually the truth that what we're trying to learn here is how to say, wow, time speeded up, how cool. And then, wow, time slowed down, how cool. In other words, to find both experiences to be great.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Isn't that where we're aiming at? That's what we're trying to get to. Once we get to that phase, then you can't lose. Then you're like the coach who just got fired and got $18 million put into his bank account.
Yeah. Well, one of the most amazing things that you could ever experience from my perspective is, sitting on the beach, overlooking the water in your house, and there'd be in Florida, they have these massive lightning storms. They're spectacular. So when we were on vacation, we had a view of the Tampa Bay, and the Sunshine Skyway Bridge was off in the distance, and this severe thunderstorm came. We were safe. It wasn't that. And the perspective of everybody, not everybody, most people, oh my God, we're at the beach. We can't go outside. It's raining and lightning. And I sat there in awe of this thunderstorm. It was spectacular. It was just a light show. It was the best. It was, I mean, severe light, and it was hitting him in the water, and something hit the Skyway Bridge a couple of times. It was, of course, it's grounded. It's meant to do that. And
Sure.
this thing was amazing. And I'm sure that the most perspective, I can't wait till this storm's over so we can go out. I'm like, I hope this thing doesn't end. It was great. It just,
I love that.
the total darkness in Tampa Bay was just the contrast of bright, almost green lightning. I mean, it's just this, it has a green tint to it. It's so powerful and it explodes. And you're just in awe of that. And then within, I don't know, 20 seconds, I guess, or whatever it takes, that thunder starts rolling in. It's amazing. But again, I might be the only one looking out the window thinking that way, but it was incredible.
And I totally get what you're saying about you being the only one, because I've had that same kind of experience. I was actually out on a date recently, and in that date, my date was basically taking everything that happened and finding a way to turn it into a negative, which was
Sounds
at
fun.
first it was pretty tiring, to be honest, until I remembered kind of, well, I can't say I remembered it totally. I partially remembered what we're talking about here. And so I started at that point attempting to respond each time that she said something with an affirmative approach to it. My response is always going to have an affirmative approach. And an interesting thing happened. First, I found myself actually beginning to shift a little bit. But even more interestingly, she would take what I was saying as if I was attacking her.
Yes.
Which I wasn't doing at all. I was trying to maintain my equilibrium and find a good positive turn and all that kind of stuff. She was actually taking what I was saying and turning it into a negative. I thought, whoa, this is really interesting.
Well, you were attacking her from her victim mindset.
True. Yes.
And so her perception is she's totally sold. I have this discussion frequently when people either hear me talk or they read something in one of my posts, and I'll get messages calling me a victim blamer, and that I'm that nobody would ever want to go through. I have people say, well, you clearly haven't gone through anything, so you don't know what it's like, and it's just
they obviously don't know your story.
Yeah, but it's like they want to own their victimhood, and
Right.
It's I feel for her, I really do, but you anything that you say that counteracts her negative spin, she feels attacked. It feels negative. And the best solution for those people is send positive vibes and to quickly get her out of your car and then go get your interior cleaned.
Very well stated, which is actually both metaphysically and physically what I did.
Yeah. It's just this wow. And I've had clients come in, and I don't know if I told you this last week or I don't remember, but I had a client come in, and he's addicted to Adderall. And he sits down and he goes, well, my doctor got me addicted to Adderall. I said, okay. And I said, so we need to look at what you want to do with that. And he goes, well, it's my doctor's fault. I go, okay. And about the fifth time of him telling me his doctor did this, I said, who kept refilling him? Did your doctor kept making you take these refills? And he goes, well, no, I'm addicted at this point, but this is all his fault. And I go, yeah, we're not going to get anywhere with this. You're addicted to Adderall. I can help you with that, but I can't help you with the fact that you're blaming your doctor for your addiction. It's your response, regardless of origin. It's your responsibility to fix this now, not his. And I said, so I'm not your right person. I just told him I didn't charge you for sessions.
I'm
not your right person.
Well, but yeah.
No. And he later messaged me and he said, well, I really would like to be your client. I go, when you get over, if you can sit in a session and not talk about your doctor's fault here, we'll get busy. But as long as you're going to go pay somebody else to reinforce your doctor may be at fault, but how's that relevant to what we need to do today? You're addicted to Adderall. It's time to stop.
Or to put it another way, at what point are you going to accept responsibility for your part of it?
Yes, and you see that, but again, this is societal, and today where there's this blame, this whole concept, and that's where that concept of radical responsibility of just at the end of the day, I don't get into the minutia of who's at fault. I get in solution oriented mode right away. Here we are. Let's get busy. Let's fix it. The origins of this are really irrelevant. That's already happened. Maybe relevant so we don't keep repeating them. But nonetheless, once we're here, let's fix this. And when people are married to their disability or negativity, people like you and I are literally toxic to them.
Well, that's kind of humbling now that you say it that way, because I didn't realize I was being toxic to people.
But it's almost like matter and antimatter. So it's not really, it's anti-toxic, but you get my point.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what that does do. It helps me have a little more empathy for them. I don't want to be them. I don't want to be in their place, but I guess I was unintentionally reinforcing that which they don't want to be reinforced on. I'm sympathetic to that. I know how that feels. That doesn't feel so good. I get that.
And for whatever reason, and not that I support this view at all, but for whatever reason, she has found comfort in her everything's negative. It's operate. Again, I can't understand it, but I do allow people to do. And she and I would love for her to maybe view it the other way and realize she has keys to the kingdom if she just changed that perspective. But there are a certain group of people that I am belief in that I first of all, I do believe anybody can change. I think these tactics of law of attraction and these strategies, they work for anybody that will use them. But
totally agree.
There are some people that are so protective of their victimhood and being stuck in the negativity and the world is against them that it is like just they're stuck in the muck and their identity would be destroyed if they stepped away from it.
And isn't it safe and fair to say that someone who is that addicted to their own patterns is living a life where time seems to be dragging, or it seems to be?
Can you imagine how slow that would be?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that would be terrible. But again, it's learning. I can't fix everybody.
No, we actually can't fix anybody. We can help other people. We can't actually fix another person, really.
Yeah. I can show people techniques that can work if they choose to implement them.
Right.
But I never give up on anybody. But when it's really clear, that somebody is not going to participate, like I've heard that this is a sort of a synopsis of a few different clients that over the years that have had one-time sessions with me. Well, I'll make suggestions. Well, I tried that, didn't work. Tried that, didn't work. Tried that, didn't work. I go, well, I've gone through all my suggestions, so you need to find somebody else. Just because they didn't really try it, but they're just wanting to dismiss it. I want to hear something different. I said, well, that's there's 19 things I went over. One of those should have worked.
That's where I would refer them to Monty Python and the movie, and now for something completely different. That's going to be their best chance for something completely different, because you're not going to get it from me.
Yeah. Let's just. But again, you within this, the time passage, and there are moments for the first time in my life, as we talked about last week, me viewing the bench differently, and not in a negative way, but my realization of mortality, the idea that, hey, I love the life I have. I'm probably going to be around for a really long time, and I want to keep doing this. But you do start to look, you do start to think, that this is, I want to make this next, whatever time this is, I want to make it really, I want to be present. I want to feel it. I want to go through it. The journey is it. And the screw ups or the victories or all that are almost irrelevant. The journey. One thing that as you know, I love to laugh, and I just things that will, and I deal with a lot of serious stuff. But there are times when something so absurd happens, and you're like in the middle of all this. The humor is just so obvious, and you get to laugh, and it like dissipates it. Do you remember the car insurance commercial? I got great news. I saved a lot of money by switching to Geico.
Oh yeah,
remember that commercial? Okay, so I'll tell this real quick. I know we're running out of time. There was a guy many years ago in South Carolina. He was indicted for a massive theft. He was a compulsive gambler, and he was suicidal. He was in jail, and the sheriff who runs the jail asked me to come in if I would talk to him about his gambling problem. And I said, yeah, I mean, he's in jail. I mean, he stole a lot of money, so he was going to do significant time. And so we go. So when I get there, the sheriff said, could you tell him, because he's been so depressed, that his wife served papers. She's immediately divorcing him.
Just what you needed.
Yeah. And his father was diagnosed with stage 4, some kind of cancer, and has 6 months to live. Wow. He said, could you tell him that for me, please? And I said, oh, yeah, okay. My first meeting. So I walk in, introduce myself, and we talk a little bit about it. I explained my story, and I said, well, the sheriff told me, that your wife is filing. She has custody of the kids. She's filing for divorce. She's selling the house. But he goes, well, that's sort of understandable. I feel real bad for what I've done. I'm going to pay him. And so he accepted that one pretty good. He said, I'm very upset with that. I said, and oh yeah, and of course he lost his license as he was accountant. He lost his license. Sure. So they processed that. And I had one other thing, but then I got to, I said, and your father has, he has terminal cancer, and they're expecting him. And the look on his face, I don't know why I instinctively did this, because it could have backfired on me, because there was just silence in the room. I said, but I do have some good news. I saved a lot of money by switching my car insurance to Geico.
That is ballsy. Yeah. You definitely have to have the right vibe in order to go with that one.
And he fell apart. He goes, thank God you said that. Oh my God. And we laughed. I said, I am so sorry. I said, I was so uncomfortable. I just didn't know what to say. And it's much funnier back then, because that commercial was played every 8 seconds. So it was a much more common theme, But we developed a really good rapport. Good news is his father lived much longer than that.
Oh wow.
He did do a lot of time, but he was also his time was cut way down. And he was able to, he got a good, all that's turned around for him. It seemed impossible. And his kids are grown. They love him. And also his story ended as good as it could. He paid everybody back. But this was a moment where humor, I didn't know what to say. And as soon as I said it, I go, yeah, I'm going to probably be arrested for this or something. I mean, this is probably illegal to do this. And, but he loved it. So I realize we're running late. I got to make another call too, buddy.
That was wonderful, though. What a great way to wind it up. And winding it up is actually what this is, because this was a conversation about time. And when you wind time up, you basically, well, of course we went over. That's part of what we do. But it also fits the theme, right? We were stretching that time out, and we were loving every minute of it, So again, that's the lesson that I take away from it. We have so much control over time. The question is, what do we want to do with it?
That's the big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. Well, I'm glad we were tackling it together. I can't wait to tackle that again next week. I don't know what the topic's going to be, but it's going to be something tied to this. So thank you for joining me and doing episode 2000 with me. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations on 2000 shows, my friend. It doesn't seem plausible. I know. I love it. I'm so proud of you. You're such a different person in a very good way. I mean, you were always been a great person, but your energy, you've worked so hard to get where you're at, and I'm very proud of all the work you've done.
And I feel very appreciative for all the support you gave me over the years as I was trying to make those changes. So thank you very much for that. And I'm also very appreciative to the listeners too. I mean, I have listeners who have actually been with us since that 12th episode. Believe it or not, there are some of those people who are still listening to the podcast, which is really exciting to me. And then there are the others who have come on since then. I'm really appreciative to all of you guys who've been joining us over the years. And we're hoping to just keep doing this for as long as we can keep doing it. So thank you guys very much. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
See you, buddy. Bye.